It's a real pleasure to talk with you today. As was already stated, I am a Belen alumnus, class of 2005. I've had a very interesting career after that. Let's see, after I graduated, I went up to West Point, decided it was a great idea to join the Army. And then 2 years later, after breaking a shin and losing some permanent hearing, I came right back down to Miami and I graduated from the University of Miami with my bachelor's and my master's degree. I went down to South America. I lived in Buenos Aires. I lived in Sao Paulo, where I picked up Portuguese. Then I went up to DC for the first time, and I worked in the Office of Andean Affairs in the State Department, so primarily working on Venezuela and Peru. Then later, I became the assistant to former Mexican President Felipe Calderon after he'd left office. I was a researcher at the Harvard Kennedy School, a research associate at the Harvard Business School. I was the executive director of the Cuba Study Group, which was an advocacy organization composed of Cuban Americans located all over the world, actually. Then after that, let's see, what did I do? Wrote a book, wrote 3 books. And then now I work in public relations. So it's been a crazy career. And if anyone ever tells you that you need to figure out exactly what you're going to do for the rest of your life when you are 14, they're wrong, because I've yet to do that. And I've been having a great time. But the reason I'm here today is because of my environmental work. And to date, I have removed 12,000, today, actually, as of today, I've removed 12,650 pounds of trash from South Florida's coastal ecosystem. That's me, and that's a whole giant load of trash. This was actually me today. I went out to Virginia Key and I picked up 300 pounds of trash. So I'm really tired, but I'm still really excited to talk with you today, because the whole purpose of this talk is not just to explain to you, my work in the mangroves, because that's just my particular interest. That's what I've dedicated myself to. But it's really to explain how all of you on your own, without other individuals or other organizations helping you, can start your own grassroots movements using the tools you have at your own disposal. And for those who may not be familiar with the term, a grassroots movement just means essentially like a movement that starts up from the bottom, from individual regular people, not from elites, not from established organizations. So, hey, that's me again. So, as was stated in the video, I've removed a whole lot of trash from the mangroves. And the reason I've done that is not because I want individuals like yourselves or others to go tramping into these environments, because you're gonna get hurt. They're dangerous and they're very fragile. So I don't want thousands of people running to the mangroves to pick up trash. On the contrary, what I wanted to do is kind of inspire a thought process in people's heads, which is, this guy's insane. And if he's willing to do this much work for a cause that he believes in, maybe I can make a small change in my own life to help it, not necessarily as drastic. So first, I'm going to talk really quickly about my work, and then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes, which is the lessons that I've learned throughout this process that you yourselves can then use to tackle whatever systemic societal issues that are important to you. And there's a whole range of them out there. And if you don't see one out there, then you're pretty blind. So this is Bearcut Preserve in Key Biscayne on the northern coast. It is typified by red mangrove swamps, grassy highlands, subtropical forests. It is beautiful. It is my favorite place on the planet. If I had my way, I'd spend every day out there cleaning up trash. If I could make a decent living off of it, but nobody pays me to do it. So I have to do it on my days off, like today. And you can find every piece of possible trash. Everything that humanity makes winds up in the ocean, and that winds up in the mangroves, always. And, I found everything from a 50-gallon drum to a 200-pound dinghy to unexploded ordnance from World War II. There was actually several U-boats, German U-boats, that were sunk off the Miami Beach coast. And you can still find the oil left over from their diesel engines that's kind of coagulated along the coastline. And I also found a 40-pound artillery shell that was undoubtedly fired at one of those U-boats. Luckily, it was a dud because I'm here today to talk with you and I'm not little itty bitty pieces somewhere in the mangroves. I've had the great pleasure of collaborating with a whole range of organizations. I've led quite a few group cleanups. As of the pandemic, I am not doing that because I work on county land and the county is not allowing people to do group activities on their land for obvious reasons to try not to spread the pandemic further. As you saw in the video, I walked the 2019 marathon with 35 pounds of mangrove trash on my back. It was horrendous. Don't ever do that. It was extremely painful. It took me 10 hours to complete, but I did it. And then the next year I did something much smarter, which was we built a 300-pound trash cart made to look like a fish. There it is. And I recruited a team to help me pull it throughout that marathon. And then we completed that and it was great. We raised $30,000 for Miami Waterkeeper, which is an organization that protects our coastline. And this bag, can I go back? Whoops, sorry guys. This bag is actually in the History of Miami Museum on permanent display. And this one's gonna go on display, this cart, in the village of Key Biscayne. So that's really exciting. It's a great opportunity to educate others about marine pollution. Why should you care about marine pollution, specifically what happens to plastic when it falls in the ocean? Well, say you throw a water bottle into the ocean. It doesn't remain a water bottle for that long. What happens is that the wave action, the UV rays from the sun, the salt, general weathering over time converts those larger pieces of plastics into microplastics, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's small pieces of plastic. And then animals at the bottom of the food chain, whether that be arthropods or bait fish or what have you, mistake that for food. And they ingest it, they eat it. And then you, I'm sure, remember the rest from science class. It works its way up the food chain. So larger predators eat the smaller prey until the absolutely largest oceanic hunters that we have, whether that be marlin or tuna or whatever, have the highest concentrations of these toxins in their bodies. And guess what? These are the animals that we like to eat. And as a result, we're essentially poisoning ourselves. Beyond just chemical damage, the toxicity of plastic, marine pollution also produces a lot of kinetic damage to marine animals. So you'll have sea turtles that are dragged down by fishing nets or by line. There's a phenomenon that occurs all over the world where whales will mistake plastic bags for food and they'll ingest it. And then they'll accumulate so much within their stomachs that they stop eating because they feel full. And then they starve to death. And then they wash ashore. This is happening all over the world. I've personally seen, plenty of birds, specifically wading birds that walk along the coastline, digging through the seagrass and through the scrag line. Their stomachs literally explode with plastic. And, it does plenty of damage to other marine animals, like sea lions and dolphins. It'll drag them down. It'll exhaust them to the point where they actually drown. So where does this come from? The short answer is that we don't know because we don't have a lot of good studies on it. But we can surmise that the majority of this trash comes from the streets, actually. You'll see trash piling up along the gutters whenever it rains in Miami, which is all the time. All that trash goes right into those gutters. It goes right into the bay without being processed in any way. All that raw plastic, all that raw trash goes right in there, and then that winds up in the mangroves and also in the open ocean. And of course, you also have plenty of careless beachgoers that just leave their trash lying around, or fishermen, or boaters that will just dump their trash overboard. This occurs in all sorts of different vessels, from tiny little skiffs, of fishermen, to giant cruise ships and cargo vessels. They'll just dump their stuff overboard. Cool. So that's what I'm interested in. Why should you care? I'm sure most of you have never been in a mangrove forest, and many of you never will be. But again, the point of this talk is not to sell you on my particular issue that I've adopted, but rather to get you to do something on your own that you care about. And the first thing you need to do is look around you, look within your surroundings, and figure out what is an issue that is important to you that you can make a difference today. And I'm not talking about solving it, like global warming or, I don't know, the criminal justice system or healthcare. I'm talking about what can you fix within your immediate surroundings right now. That's the kind of mentality that you need to have. Once you have an issue, and I hope that you are passionate about some issue. You are a school whose motto is meant for others, and there are plenty of problems in society and plenty of problems in Miami for you to tackle. Well, once you choose your problem, once you choose your issue, the first step is you do not ask for permission. I cannot stress this enough. If I had gone to the county or my local commissioner and said, hi, my name is Andrew Tasso. I have a background in foreign policy and academia. I have absolutely no background in science or environmentalism, but I'd really like to go into a protected natural area and start cleaning up trash by myself in a very dangerous location. I would have either received a resounding no or a deafening silence. The reason systemic societal issues exist is because the powers that be either do not know it exists or don't care, essentially. Now, before I continue, this isn't to say that you need to jump headfirst into a problem that you do not understand and try to solve it on your own. That is not how this works, because history is replete with individuals with the best of intentions who tried to solve a problem, but because they do not have the right background, because they are not prepared, because they don't talk to people who actually work in their field, they mess it up royally. So do your background research. Take time to figure out what you can do. And of course, rule number one is do no harm. So if you're going to go out there and you might actually do more harm than good, for the love of God, don't go out there and start trying to fix whatever you want to fix. Okay. You want to get to work. Like now. I'm not even joking. Immediately. You need to find a problem that you can fix at the margins somehow immediately. You want to be a doer and not a pointer. The difference between those two being that the doer is an individual who goes out and tries to solve a systemic societal problem. There are lots of pithy quotes floating around social media about what leadership is. But when it comes really down to where the rubber meets the road, leadership is just doing more work than everybody else. And, really putting yourself into really dedicating yourself to a mission that you choose. That's what being a leader is. That's what being a doer is. A pointer is someone who will, as the name suggests, point to a problem and tell other people, hey, there's a problem over there. Someone should fix that. And that's not to negate the usefulness or the importance of pointers, because if you want to start a grassroots movement, you will need them because they will be your base of support and they will help disseminate your message. But by themselves, pointers, just people saying, hey, there's a problem, they do not cause positive systemic societal change. Like I said, leadership is tough. It's really hard. You need to put yourself out there and lead by example. That's the best way to lead. You don't need to take any MBA courses. You don't need to, get a degree in anything, and you don't need to have someone with authority over other people telling you you're now a leader. You become a leader when you dedicate yourself to something fully. And change is cumulative. So what does that mean? You are not going to fly in like a superhero and beat up the monster or the alien attacking the city, do a super cool move and save everybody and then get accolades from everyone and then fly off into the distance and you're done, you're a hero. That's not how change happens. Like I stated, I will never, ever solve the problem of global marine pollution because it is far too large for any one person to address. What I can do is that I can walk into the mangroves and I can clean up a 5 by 5 square foot area. And then I can do it again and again and again until after, now it's been 96 days of doing this over the last 3 years, I have cleaned up square miles that are now pristine that used to look like landfills. That is how change happens over time. And it is hard. But if you want to dedicate yourself to a problem, and you truly do, then you can really start to see change over time. So, like I said, you need to figure out what is the change you can do right now, locally. You know, think globally, act locally. You might have heard that before. It is a nice refrain, but it is how you need to start thinking if you want to address these problems. So, you have your problem, you started working, and you're starting to see localized change. That's great, and kudos to you. But if you really want to tackle a systemic societal issue, if you really want to try to address it at its roots, you need to get your message out. You need to build a movement. You need to inspire other people to join you and to dedicate their own time to this effort. And the tools that you have to do this are fourfold. They're social media, traditional media, collaboration, and politics. Social media. You're all social media natives. You're all digital natives. You were born into this. This is nothing new. There are a range of platforms out there. And I suggest if you want to start a movement, you need to get on all of them. And they each have their strengths. They each have their weaknesses. The algorithms are constantly changing. So I'm not going to give you any advice on that. But if you produce good quality content over time, people will follow you and you will begin to see real traction. When it comes to social media, rule number 1, it sounds a little obvious, but it's important, is record your work. I could go into the mangroves by myself repeatedly, day after day, and pick up trash. And barring some random fisherman, coming by, or some random person wandering into the mangroves, like wondering what on earth I'm doing in there, no one's gonna know. So you want people to know what you're doing, so you have to record your work. Video is most powerful now. So rather than just audio or images, my advice to you is to go through video. Social media acts to multiply your efforts. It disseminates it throughout a whole range of different audiences that you can then tap into to fuel your movement. Once you record your work, it's important that you educate other people on what you're doing. So I could go out there, again, into the mangroves, set up a GoPro on a tripod, and just silently pick up trash. But no one's gonna know why on earth I'm doing that and why they should care. So in my other videos, I've gone to great lengths to explain the whole cycle of marine pollution, which I've already done to you, as well as why people should care about it. So you need to educate people, you need to show people what you're doing, but also why they should care. And in order to do that, you should exhibit your passion. You're out there working hard for a reason. Show other people why and why they should be too. So once that happens, you disseminate your message along all these different platforms, and then you start over time to build your core base of support. These are the people that you're going to rely on to share, to comment, to engage with you in other metrics, to push forward that content so that people will start essentially signing up for this social movement. Traditional media is your parents' media. And it is everything from TV to radio to newspaper, magazines, etc. And the strength of traditional media is that it expands your audience. So if you look at the demographics of the people on social media that follow you, that are passionate about what you're passionate about, chances are they look, they talk, and they do everything just like you. Once you get on TV, radio, newspapers, etc., then that's when you start to reach different audiences that would otherwise never see your work. Simply the algorithm doesn't work like that. You are in different circles within these social networks. Traditional media grows from social media. So if you're out there long enough, if you're passionate about what you're doing, if you're producing decent content, if you're learning from your mistakes, journalists will reach out to you and ask you for an interview or for a comment or for something. But that's not to say that you should just rest on your laurels and you should wait for the Miami Herald to come to you and beg to do a front page story on you. That's not how it works. So what you should be doing is proactively reaching out to these journalists. You start locally, of course. So you need to know what the outlets' audiences are. I could have very easily reached out to the New York Times or the Washington Post and told them my story, but they would have never printed anything because there are no mangroves up there. So no one's going to care. So what you need to do is you have to ensure that whatever you're working on, the outlets are dedicated to those audiences. And just like in social media, you need to educate individuals. You need to educate the journalists and by proxy, those audiences that read or listen to their outlets. You need to explain why you're doing what you're doing, why it's important, why other people should join. Collaboration. I've had the great pleasure of collaborating with a whole range of organizations over these last few years in my endeavors. Before I continue, you're going to allow me, because I have control of the screen, a short diatribe. For the love of God, be humble in what you do. And I say this because I've seen so many people jump into a social movement, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to take on the world with all the enthusiasm they could possibly muster, and they get bogged down in stupid politics about who gets to run what, who said what to whom, and it is poisonous. I've seen this over and over and over again in countless organizations, everything from Belen, from student organizations to Fortune 100 companies, that people get lost in the stupid politics and they lose sight of why they entered a specific space to begin with. So I cannot stress this enough. So I'll repeat it. Be humble. You do not own any issue. It doesn't matter how much work you've put into it. It doesn't matter how much you care about it. It doesn't matter how pure you think your motives are compared to anyone else's. It's not about you. It never has been and it never will be. That problem will exist long after you're dead if you don't do something about it. So, one more time, it's not about you. That said, you want to reach out to other people working on the same problem that you are. It doesn't matter how obscure you think it is. I guarantee you there have been organizations and people working on it for decades. So reach out to them and learn from them. You don't want to duplicate other people's efforts. What do I mean by this? So I've run a nonprofit before. I could have very easily founded my own nonprofit based on the mangroves and taken those $30,000 that we raised and used it for my NGO. But I did not. I gave it to another organization. The reason for that is that they are much better at filing briefs and suing the government whenever they do something that's messed up. I'm not so good at that. I know what my competitive advantage is. I know what I can go out and do better than most other people. And that is go into the mangroves, obviously, pick up trash, use social media to disseminate the message, talk to groups and individuals like yourselves, and do media. And I can kind of fit myself as a puzzle piece within the larger picture. I can find my niche. I don't step on other people's toes. I don't duplicate efforts. And that way you push the movement forward. Again, it's about dropping your ego and knowing when to give other people the limelight or resources or whatever. Lastly, the reason you want to collaborate with other people is very personal. It's for moral support. There will be ups and there will be downs, and people have been working on this issue for a long time before you showed up, and they will help you get through the tough times if you ask for that help. And believe me, there are times where you will need it. Finally, we have reached politics. This is where the sociopaths live. Unfortunately, it's also where real change happens. It doesn't matter how many times you march or organize or clean up or start social media campaigns or push a hashtag. Real change only happens when legislation and regulations are implemented on a federal or state level. And that's very frankly the only matter that matters. Most politicians are really just concerned with acquiring and increasing their powers. I'm sure there are other politicians that are not, but I've yet to meet any. Luckily, you can use this to your advantage because politicians are absolutely obsessed with re-election. That's what they focus on. They will spend every single day, not an exaggeration, every day, 2, 3, 4 hours in a tiny booth with a giant phone book, calling people up, asking them for money. It's called call time, and they all do it. But again, you can use this to your advantage because believe it or not, and the cynics might tell you otherwise, but the people who actually work in politics will tell you the truth. They listen to their constituents because they have to. Because if they don't get reelected. So if you actually call them, if you email them, if you visit them, if you, God forbid, use a pen and a piece of paper and mail them an actual letter with a stamp, they will read it, either them or their staff, and their staff will then update, whatever legislator you reached out to. What you want to do ultimately is to make your issue an electoral issue. So that means that when a politician is either up for re-election or running for the first time, they include it as a plank within their larger platform. And it becomes an issue within that election cycle. And it's something that you can hold them accountable for because they'll have to make public announcements on it. They'll be on record, and you can and if they renege on it later, then you can bring it up and shame them essentially. So say everything goes great. You get someone in office who is interested in whatever issue you're interested in. Once that happens, you need to differentiate between allies and champions. And the difference being that allies are people who will sign on to legislation, for example, or just support it rhetorically, while champions are people that will really push it forward and will make sure that it actually gets passed. You want to build coalitions with unlike organizations and individuals, because basically you want to push on a particular politician from multiple angles in order for them to feel like literally everyone in the universe is just coming at them and telling them, hey, you need to make this an important issue. So they'll feel the pressure and they'll feel like they have to act. And finally, be prepared to be disappointed. There will be ups and there will be downs. I've already said this before. The organizations and the people that are most effective in these circles are usually just the ones who didn't give up. So when things are down, make sure that you do not give up because this issue is important to you and it should be to other people. That is all that I have for you today, and I will leave it to any questions you might have.